Welcome to the Elvis Presley Channel. Elvis Presley, an American superstar who stole the hearts of countless women around the world, loved only one woman all his life, and she loved him back. She was the one for whom he said, "She's all I ever lived for. She was always my best girl." He always placed his best girl on a pedestal far above his girlfriends, friends, or any other people in his life. Who was Elvis Presley's true love? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Elvis Presley channel. Elvis Presley's interesting relationship with his mother. Elvis Presley was one of the most influential musicians in history. Despite being born far away from luxuries as a son of a poor and hard-working mother, Elvis never lacked one thing in life, the immense love of his parents. Especially his pure and adoring connection with his mother Gladys will be remembered forever. Their indivisible bond, which was so much more than their lifelong baby talk, that no one else could understand. A devoted son who was determined to comfort his mother since childhood, and a protective, affectionate mother dedicated all their lives to each other. Gladys's death left a permanent scar on her son's life, and surprisingly her shattered son died 19 years later on the same date, validating that there would be no Elvis without his mother Gladys. Elvis Presley was born into a low-wage family and was the family's only child, who later became the best-selling solo musical artist of all time, with cumulative record sales between 600 million and 1 billion copies. Gladys Love Smith, Elvis Presley's mother, married Vernon Presley in 1933. Vernon lied about his age to get the marriage license because he was just 17 years old. They returned to Tupelo, Mississippi, to a 2-room house. Gladys realized she was pregnant with twins after a few years of marriage and went into labor at home on January 8, 1935, giving birth to 2 infants, one tragically stillborn and one healthy son, Elvis Aaron Presley. Elvis's relationship with his mother was strengthened and intensified by the loss of one child, and he rapidly became the focus of their life. Gladys was always afraid of losing Elvis, having already lost one son. She didn't return to the clothes factory after she was released from hospital. Instead, she waited a few months and then began cotton picking, which was grueling, dry, itchy work, but allowed her to carry Elvis around the rows with her in a sack. He is claimed to have helped Mom with the cotton when he was a little older, pulling the balls off the stems. Vernon, Elvis's father, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for forging a cheque when Elvis was 3 years old. Elvis became a reason for his mother to remain strong, and the link between mother and son grew even closer. One of the indications of their close bond was their special communication in a type of baby talk that only they understood. It was a code that included a variety of pet names for each other, as well as their favourite things. Due to her satin complexion, Elvis Presley reportedly nicknamed his mother Satnin. According to one of Elvis's lovers, Linda Thompson, Elvis was notorious for chatting to his mother in baby language, which he continued for the rest of his life. Elvis and his mother were so close that even Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was occasionally shut out of the family. Gladys was Elvis's first serious girlfriend as an adolescent, according to Dixie Locke, Elvis's girlfriend. It felt like Vernon Presley was an outsider. Truly, he wasn't really part of Elvis and Mrs. Presley's group. I mean, it sounds strange, but they had such great love and admiration for each other, and I don't think Elvis's father had much respect at that time. It was almost as if Elvis was the father and his father was the youngster. Gladys used to urge Elvis Presley to believe that he was destined for greatness. She claims that when one twin dies, the survivor develops all of the traits of the deceased sibling. Gladys was further convinced that Elvis was a special child when he became so ill with tonsillitis that they feared he would die. Because they couldn't afford a doctor, they sat by his bed and prayed, and Gladys believed that the fever was a sign from God, proof that her boy was truly special. Religion was always a big part of Elvis's life as a kid. Gladys would read him the children's Bible stories while they lay in bed together, explaining to him about Jonah's adventures in the belly of the whale and Joshua's at the Battle of Jericho. He would later write hymns about each of them. Gladys used to tell Elvis about how he would slide from her lap in church when he was less than 2 years old, go into the aisle and try to sing with the choir. His mother had little money, but Gladys made sure her son had everything he needed, including a guitar for his 11th birthday, despite the fact that Elvis had requested a bicycle from his mother. She purchased him a guitar instead because she was afraid he'd damage himself on the bike. Gladys was a highly protective mother, which is understandable given the fact that she had already lost one child. She reportedly forbade Elvis from participating in sports because she was afraid he would get hurt, and she reportedly walked him to school every day, even into high school. Just like Gladys, Elvis was also thoughtful towards his mother from a young age. After Vernon was released from prison, he never had a permanent job again, and Elvis assumed the position of Gladys's guardian. Elvis seems to have known from a young age that he would have to take responsibility for the family's financial troubles. When he overheard his parents stressing about money one day, he told Gladys, "Don't worry, Mama, when I grow up I'm going to buy you a nice house, pay off all your debts at the grocery store, and buy you and Daddy 2 Cadillacs." Elvis considered his parents as his babies, said Lamar Fike, a friend. He referred to his mother as his child. Elvis purely loved his mother, but if there was something important for him other than his mother, then it was certainly music. The love for the hymns that he used to listen to from his mother in his childhood lasted for the rest of his life. He had developed a true passion for producing music by the time he was a teenager, winning the talent show at his Memphis high school. Gladys had always told him he was special, and Elvis was eager to prove Gladys correct to help his family escape poverty. After graduating from high school in 1953, Elvis worked odd jobs to support his family while pursuing his dream of becoming a musician. He stepped into Memphis Recording Services, which would later become the world-famous Sun Studio, one day in July of that year, and put down his own money to record a few tracks. One of the songs he recorded that day was My Happiness, which he intended to send as a gift to his mother. While Gladys obviously adored the gift, Sam Phillips, the owner of a record label, saw potential in the young musician and chose to take him under his wing. Elvis was soon on the run, accompanied by his mother and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Elvis Presley's first record, That's All Right, was released in 1954, and he swiftly rose to fame thanks to his wild new sound and hip-swinging dancing movements. He was the youthful king of rock and roll after Heartbreak Hotel in 1956, and he seemed to be the least lonely person in the world, every man's envy and every girl's desire. He also signed a movie deal with Paramount Pictures that same year, ensuring that he would become a household figure. Elvis tried his hardest as his fame grew to provide Gladys and make up for some of the hardships they had faced throughout his childhood. He established Gladys Music, a music publishing company, and ensured that she earned a stable income from it. He also followed through on a childhood commitment to give his mother a Cadillac, selecting a beautiful pink model and handing it to his mother, despite the fact that she had never driven before. Presley's overprotective mother had been worried about his safety and security since he became a famous performer. Gladys and Vernon attended Elvis's concerts during the first few months of his career, but their remarkable closeness couldn't go unnoticed. As a result, a rising celebrity was dubbed Helpless Mama's Boy, and reporters began to depict their relationship as monstrously overbearing. The fans rushed the bandstand at one high school dance, hoping to get a glimpse of Elvis. Gladys threw herself into the crowd, picking the girls off her son and shouting, "Why are you trying to kill my boy?" After a show in May 1955, hundreds of teenage girls arrived in his dressing room and stripped him of his clothes. Gladys began to be concerned for her son's safety, while Elvis handled the situation as a joke. He bought a ranch-style home in Audubon Drive, a quiet residential area of Memphis, when he was only 20 years old. Gladys had only known shotgun shacks, jalopies, and the public housing her entire life. Her family couldn't afford a memorial or a winding sheet after her father died. Welfare covered the doctor's $15 delivery cost when Elvis was born. It was a dream come true for her to be under the gorgeous roof at Graceland with her son. However, the dream quickly turned into one of her nightmares. Gladys had welcomed Elvis's followers into their home when they initially moved in, but then the admirers started pouring in by the hundreds, which bothered her. But it was the reaction of some of Elvis's middle management neighbours that really got to her. Gladys pegging out her clothing and other washing up in the garden irritated some of them. Some murmured, "It's like she's still down in Mississippi, with her nasty relatives. She's dragging the neighbourhood down." Gladys was told that feeding her hens in front of the home was terrible for Elvis's image, which was the ultimate insult. Graceland felt to Elvis like the conclusion of his dreams, a public declaration of how far he'd gone and how privileged he'd been. But it was a place of disease, solitude and melancholy for Gladys. Her son's success provided her with the large house and expensive cars he had promised her, but because she couldn't drive, she was left alone in the house as she waited patiently for his calls. Elvis received a recruitment notice and was forced into the United States Army shortly after. Gladys did not have another happy day in her life after that. Elvis was stationed in Germany for a year and a half, calling his mother whenever he had the opportunity. Gladys was in poor health when Elvis was serving his country. She wasn't physically capable of travelling abroad. Worse, Germany drew up images of war and more life-threatening scenarios for her son. Gladys's health had deteriorated significantly by this time. She began to drink, but she did it in secret because she was aware of her son's aversion to alcohol. Elvis tried to cope with his mother's illness by keeping her close to him. When he was assigned to army training in Texas, he rented a house nearby for his family. Gladys was back in Memphis, in the hospital by August 1958. She died on August 14, 1958, at the age of 46, from acute hepatitis and serious liver damage. Elvis's world has been shattered. Her situation was quite distressing at the time. "Please don't take my baby," he mourned. "She's not dead," Elvis cried as he threw himself over her casket and refused to let go. "She's just napping off." "Goodbye, sweetie," he said as she was lowered to her final resting place. "I adore you to death. I've dedicated my entire life to you." The king of rock and roll would later remark about his mother, "I had to say goodbye to the one person I'd ever loved." His life's greatest tragedy was her death. According to his peers, he became a completely different guy after that day. Adding another loss to his life, Vernon Presley also died in 1975 after suffering a heart attack, and his last words to Elvis were, "You worried your mother into death." When he met Priscilla Beaulieu, his sadness began to fade. His relatives and friends were astounded by how much the lovely 14-year-old ingenue reminded them of Gladys when she was younger, and there's a striking resemblance between them. Gladys, his recently deceased and dearly mourned mother, was possibly the only reason he married her. He was married only once in his life. Elvis wanted to change her personality to suit his needs because she was young. He achieved whatever he desired throughout his life. Love life was not an exception. But despite his best efforts, he was unable to find peace following his mother's death. Marriage couldn't provide him with an escape from his loneliness. No one could ever take his mother's place in his heart. Elvis began talking about his mother as soon as he met Priscilla for the first time, according to Priscilla's 1984 biography, Elvis and Me. Elvis's mother was the love of his life. The king finally married his finished creation after an 8-year relationship. Priscilla gave birth to their daughter, Lisa Marie, within a year of their marriage. Elvis had begun to refer to her as Satinin, his nickname for his satin-skinned mother. Elvis announced on his 37th birthday that Priscilla was leaving Graceland and taking Lisa Marie with her. He signed the official divorce papers on his 39th birthday. Elvis had been unfaithful to Priscilla on several occasions, finally driving her into the arms of her karate instructor. Jealousy consumed the king. He went down a lonely street, despite the fact that practically any other woman could still be his. With his other laments, he pushed his followers to tears. "Just call me Mr. Lonesome. Are you lonesome tonight? Lonely man, I'm so lonesome I could cry. He must have hoped for a fresh start when he signed the divorce papers on his birthday. The following year, on his 40th birthday, Walter Cronkite stated on the 6 o'clock news, displaying a current photo, "Elvis, fat and 40. In the last 2 years of his life, he received 12,000 prescriptions for pills and injectables, the majority of which were narcotics. The coroner discovered 11 distinct kinds in his system. The king of rock and roll died as a result of an overdose. The date was August 16th, exactly 19 years after he had buried his beloved mother and sobbed inconsolably, 'Oh God, all I have is gone.'" Elvis did everything for his mum. He saw his mother as more important than his girlfriends, friends, or anyone else in his life. It's often said that the cause of Elvis's tragedy was the early death of his mother, and it came through clearly in his voice at her funeral, which was saddened for the lady he had to leave, the one woman he had ever truly loved, the woman he couldn't make happy after being famous. If you like this video, you should definitely check this other video where I explain why Elvis Presley's fame was a curse for his mother.